You guys know how much I love to shop. Exactly. I'm not a big fan of shopping at all. If I have to, it's most likely because somebody is sick and I'm going to go do it. Otherwise, we don't need it. We just don't need it. We'll starve and it'll be okay. We really don't need it. Now, I'm glad God gave me my wife because she loves to shop. She goes and brings food back and we have food, and I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful that I didn't have to go get that. I didn't have to go and purchase that food. I mean, I did purchase it, but I didn't have to retrieve it. And that's the shopping part of things is what bothers me. I don't like to shop. And that's just the bottom line. I don't like to shop. I will do it. And I understand it's necessary, but I don't like to do it. So the other day, what we did was we ordered something online to take the pain and the suffering away from the shopping experience. We got it online and had it delivered to the store. Now, all we have to do is walk into the store, go up to customer service and say, hey, you did the retrieving, we'd like to walk out with it. We've already paid, we don't even have to visit the cash register. We are just ready to go. Let's leave. So we get there and we look at the items that we purchased. One of them was torn. It was an outfit and it was torn, it had holes in it. The other item was the wrong size. Wrong size to the point of we ordered extra large, we got extra small. So it's not like, well, it's close. No, it's completely the wrong size. So guess what we ended up doing? Shopping. We had to go in there and we had to, all right, we're just going to have to go find this ourselves. And we had to hunt. We had to go and shop. This was the part that we were supposed to miss. This is why we did that extra, we went the extra mile and made sure we didn't have to go through this experience. And we had to go through it anyway. I'm sure somebody put those in the packages and sent them on their way and sent them to the store and everything, and they thought, oh, that's good enough. It's good enough. Hey, we made it into the packages. We got it that far. It's good enough and sent it out. When good enough becomes acceptable, it becomes a standard. You cannot accept good enough as the standard for some things. Some things are okay to leave at that good enough status. If you make a meal or do a project, it isn't always important that you reach new heights of expertise. You don't have to hey, I made macaroni and cheese again. What do you think of it this time? I did something extra special to it. You can ruin that. I know. I've tried to make gourmet stuff before. I don't do toast right. I'm not cut out for this stuff. You don't have to reach new heights of expertise every time you try something. Not everything needs to be done to perfection. Some things are okay with good enough. It's okay. But there are some things in life you don't want to leave in the neighborhood of good enough. When it comes to raising your children, I hope good enough is not your goal in life. They're still alive. Nailed it. You want to push a little farther than good enough when it comes to raising children. When you go to a doctor, you're hoping that they don't live by that standard themselves. You're still breathing, so I think we've done it. It hurts so bad. Yeah, but it's good enough. It's good enough. You didn't walk out of here, or you can walk out of here, so we did it. Good enough. When you go to a mechanic, you don't go in there and say, well, there's a funny sound going on. I put gas in the tank and it's still moving, so good enough. We got you. There are certain places in life that you hope they don't live by the standard of good enough. Making macaroni and cheese and toast and stuff like that, good enough, so that's good enough. But there are some things that you don't want to leave to that standard. The reason that good enough isn't acceptable for certain things is because of the impact it will have if it's left to that standard. You don't want to leave it to that standard. The book of Jude is actually only one chapter long. It's a short book. It's only one chapter long. And it's written in the time period where Christians were being killed for their faith. Families were being torn apart. They were being tortured and killed together. This isn't just a story that we read. It's actually something that happened in history. These people were being tortured for their faith. Of all the times in history to take a stand for Christ, this would have been one of the worst times to take a stand for Christ. But look at what Jude writes to the church in that first century. Jude chapter 1 and verse 3 said, "Beloved, while I was very diligent to write to you concerning our common salvation, I found it necessary to write to you, exhorting you to contend earnestly for the faith, which was once for all delivered to the saints." If you study the history of this time period, you will see that Christians were being burned at the stake. And it's not just a bedtime story. That actually happened in history. People were being burned at the stake. They were being sent into arenas and being torn apart by wild animals. This was actually happening to people. They could have avoided all of this if they would have just renounced their faith in Jesus Christ. Just don't worship him. Don't advertise that Jesus is the answer for anything, and we'll leave you alone. But they wouldn't do that. Many people did not do that, and they died those horrible deaths. This is the generation that Jude is encouraging to contend earnestly for the faith. This is the generation. I want you to advertise. I want you to get it out there. I want you to contend for the faith. He wanted them to keep fighting. He wanted them to continue to tell people about how God wanted a relationship with those people. You need to get out there and you need to tell them and you need to contend for the faith. Get the message of Jesus Christ out to the world. But have you seen what it could cost us? Have you seen what's happening to the other Christians? Absolutely. This is the generation where Jude is saying, you contend for the faith. And Jude wasn't a hypocritical Christian either. In AD 65, he was beaten to death with a club because he was contending for the faith. And that's not one of those, you don't sign up for that death. You don't sign up for that one. That's a painful death, because when they beat you, they weren't beating you to kill you immediately. They were beating you until they decided to kill you. Jude experienced that. So he wasn't a hypocritical Christian. He was a man who contended for the faith himself. Jude was one of Jesus' disciples. He saw Jesus die, and then he saw Jesus after he rose from the dead. Jesus did die, and history even shows there's more evidence to prove the resurrection of Jesus Christ than all the cases in history. All the legal cases in history, there's more evidence to show that Jesus rose from the dead. And yes, I'm not going to be able to stand here and say, well, this is how he did it. You don't explain that. You don't say, he rose from the dead, and this is how it all happened. Here's the scientific evidence. Here's all that. No, there's historical evidence that Jesus rose from the dead, and you can't deny that. There's so much evidence for that. Jude either spread the lie that Jesus rose from the dead and died a brutal death defending that lie, or Jesus actually rose from the dead and was the Son of God. Why would Jude go through that if he didn't truly believe it was accurate? Also, if Jesus had not proven himself to be the Son of God by rising from the dead, Jude would have been a very sadistic man, encouraging the Christians of that day, contend for the faith. I know it's a lie, but I want you to live it out. Go ahead and get out there and do this. And I'm really sorry about that. No, he wasn't that guy. He wasn't a sadistic man. He knew Jesus rose from the dead. He knew this was the truth, and he's asking the Christians of that day to contend for the faith. The Greek word contend, the Greek word for contend is the word that we get our word agonize from. So what he's saying is, I want you to agonize for the faith. You know, when people do work, they work out because they want to compete in something. They agonize and they train and they put themselves through things I will never do. I know it's not going to happen. I'm like, I'm going to get in shape. And then I say, round is a shape. I'm good enough. I'm okay with that. But when you contend, what Jude is saying is, I want you to agonize for this. I want you to really put the effort in there for the faith. I want you to advertise. Jude isn't just telling these people to be good and go to church. That's not what Jude is saying. Hey, Christians, just be good and go to church. You know, fulfill your religious requirements, and that's good enough. Jude isn't telling them that. He's telling them to live it. Be passionate about it. Live out your faith, because this is one of those areas where good enough isn't going to cut it. Good enough is not going to cut it here. You need to contend for the faith. He wants people to know why it is so important for them to contend. He's asking them to be invested. I want you to be invested. Paul the Apostle seemed to have had the same mindset. Paul the Apostle wrote a letter to Rome. Look at what he wrote here in Romans chapter 8 and verse 31. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Who shall bring a charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is he who condemns? It is Christ who died, and furthermore is also risen, who is even at the right hand of God, who also makes intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter, yet in all things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Were these first century Christians just out of their minds? Look at what Paul says. Hey, I know, it's bad. It's bad. It actually can't get worse. We're going to be torn apart by wild animals. We're going to be burned at the stake. Yeah, this is going to happen. But then he says, well, who's going to bring charge against God's elect? Who's going to condemn you for this? Who's going to do this? He says, it's even prophesied that for your sake we are killed all day long. We are going to die for our faith. We're going to do this. And then he ends it with, we are more than conquerors. You just got torn apart and killed. And how do you define yourself? Conquerors. We conquered. We win. These first century Christians seem to be out of their mind. Are they just crazy? Because Paul ended up having his head cut off because he was preaching that Jesus Christ was the truth. Paul died too for contending for the faith. These people were not living good enough Christianity. That is not what they were living. They were all in. And many of them died terrible deaths to get the news to the next generation. Jesus is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. And it's going to cost me my life to get that message to you, but it's worth it. It's worth it. I want that message to get on. Now, just in case you're starting to sweat a little bit, this is not a sermon encouraging you to sign up to be a martyr. I'm not like, there's a sign-up sheet out in the foyer. I just need, which one do you want to go down with? It's not one of those messages. I just want to ask you to take a few minutes and evaluate the impact you are leaving behind. You. Not the impact they left behind, but the impact you're leaving behind. I want you to take a minute and evaluate the impact that you're leaving behind. There are so many things in life that we put high on our priority list. We just take them and stack them up. We may be enjoying those things, but are we leaving the impact that we want to leave with the investment that we're making? Because you're investing in things in your life too, just like I am investing in things in my life, but are you leaving an impact with the things that you're investing in? You may have a really cool collection of bendy straws, but at the end of your life, is that really what you want to be remembered for? Like, man, I was really into that. It was a lot of fun. Okay, great. Is that the legacy you're hoping to leave behind? I just want you to take a few minutes this morning, and I want you to evaluate the impact that you're leaving behind. Because you get one shot to live this life for Christ. You don't get to start over as a new person. You're like, well, that was a trial run. Now I'm going to do better this time. There's no better this time. You get one shot to live this life. So evaluate the impact that you're leaving behind. Some people make a huge impact by the way they live their lives, and other people barely create a ripple. They just live their lives and it's over. I just want to ask everyone to sit back just for a few minutes and evaluate your impact. Christmas is next Sunday. So I want to take a quick peek into a part of the story that's not visited that often. I just want to take a little glimpse into this. Herod the Great isn't the person that gives us that warm, fuzzy feeling at Christmas time. Like, hey, name the people in the Christmas story. Herod the Great might not even make the list. Okay, we're not. Well, when I think of Christmas, I think of Herod the Great. We don't usually. He doesn't even make the list. He was a tyrant and he was a selfish leader. But he was a very vital part of the Christmas story. Mary has already given birth to Jesus, and she has been raising him for 2 years by the time Herod is introduced to the story at all. So look at Matthew chapter 2 and verse 1. It says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him.' And when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him." Around 40 BC, Herod was given authority over Judea because of the friendship his dad had with Julius Caesar. That is why Herod was given the authority over Judea. He became powerful by association. He didn't earn anything. He didn't conquer anything. He was given his position because his dad was friends with Julius Caesar. So far, that's his legacy. You knew a guy. That's how he became the King of the Jews. He also gave himself the title King of the Jews. That was a title he gave himself. He built great structures, including the temple, in order to win the Jewish people over. He built this, and it was an impressive temple. By the time it was done, it only lasted 8 years before it was destroyed, but it was impressive. It was an impressive temple, and he was trying to win the favor of the Jewish people. The problem was that he was just a horrible person. He was just a horrible person. Go read history on Herod the Great. If you're trying to go to bed, it will do it for you. There's not a lot of, the plot doesn't thicken. He was a flash in the pan kind of person. He was a horrible, horrible man. Even the title Herod the Great was self-proclaimed. Nobody said, man, he's great. No, nobody did. He gave himself that title. Herod the Great, King of the Jews, I will call myself that. Oh yeah, talk about prestige. You got it going on, man. It's so embarrassing. But he is Herod the Great, King of the Jews, because he wanted to be seen as great. He wanted that title. When the wise men came to find Jesus, they said, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" That statement is what shook Herod up. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? Who are you talking to? The self-proclaimed King of the Jews. So Herod, his cage has been rattled at this point. Who are you looking for? The one who has been born King of the Jews. Herod wanted to be forever stamped into history as the great King of the Jews. So when the wise men used his title to describe the baby they were looking for, it troubled him. He's not happy. And it says all of Jerusalem was troubled with him because they knew what he was like when he was not happy. Because Herod wanted to be great. Herod felt threatened by someone else being referred to as the King of the Jews. So Herod slips into acting mode. He's like, I've got to put on a performance here because I've got to get rid of this King of the Jews. Look at Matthew chapter 2 and verse 4. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. Location. This is the first piece of information Herod needs. Where is this kid? Where's he to be born? And they said, well, it's Bethlehem. That's where he's supposed to be born. Where is the threat located? That's the first thing Herod needs to know. But there's still a problem. He still has an issue. Even if he knew what town Jesus was in, how is he going to get rid of Jesus? I mean, it's a town of people. How could he narrow things down to make sure it was Jesus that was eliminated? Because Jesus is the one that they're calling the King of the Jews. That's when he moved into the next part of his plan. Look at verse 7. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. The wise men had told him that they had been following his star. So Herod wanted to know when that journey started, since this was the sign of his birth. How long have you been following this star? When did it appear? It had appeared 2 years earlier. That's when it appeared. Now Herod has a time frame he can use. The new King of the Jews is 2 years old at the most. So now I have a location, and now I have a time frame. I have a town, and I have an age. Now to narrow things down a little bit more, where does he live in that town? I need to know where he lives. Look at verse 8. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the young child, and when you have found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also." Sure. Herod didn't want to worship Jesus. He wanted to execute Jesus. I want to know not only what town he's in, not only how old he is, I want to know the location where he's at right now so I can come and worship him, because he's carrying my self-proclaimed title, and nobody takes my title. He has worked hard for the title of greatness, and no baby was going to come in and take that away from him. There's a little bit of humor in the story here when you look at the arrogance of Herod the Great. A baby is going to take my title? I don't think so. So I'm going to wipe out this baby. I'm going to wipe this out. So Herod chooses to use the method of religious hypocrisy. That's where he goes. I'm going to use religious hypocrisy. I want to worship him also. So when you find him, would you come and tell me where he's located that I may worship the King of the Jews also? As we read the story, we find out that God informed the wise men of Herod's intentions, and they never did return to Herod to tell him where Jesus was located. But that sent Herod into a power-hungry rage. They were supposed to come back and tell me, and they never did. When Herod became angry, God told Mary and Joseph what was going on and said, "Take the child to Egypt and stay there. Stay in Egypt until, basically, you're staying there until Herod dies, because Herod wants to kill your son. Herod wants to kill Jesus, so go to Egypt. For his protection, take him to Egypt." Herod was a very insecure and self-absorbed man. He was the one who was supposed to be remembered as King of the Jews. He was the one who was supposed to be recorded for all time as the Great. That he was supposed to have this. He wanted this to be his legacy so much that he performed one of the most heinous crimes in history. Look at verse 16. Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry, and he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its districts from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Herod's insatiable appetite for power led him to murdering all of these children. Kill all the babies that are 2 years old and younger. Kill them all, because I want to take out the new King of the Jews. Jesus, however, escaped the infanticide because his parents fled to Egypt, and he is known today as the true King of the Jews. He is the Great. Jesus is known to this day as the Great. Herod wanted the legacy of greatness. He even killed his own wife and his 3 sons to maintain a powerful reputation. And he's been forgotten for the most part, because when you come up with names in the Christmas story, Herod the Great may not even make the list. He even ordered many dignitaries to be killed upon his death because he wanted it to be said that there was great mourning when he died. What a super guy. What a great guy. I know they're not going to cry when I die, so kill all of these people so it can be recorded that there was great mourning upon my death. What a sick and twisted individual. Herod lived to be 69 years old. Jesus lived to be 33 years old. Compare the impact. Just take a second and compare the impact. It all came down to what they chose to invest themselves in. Herod had power and money and fame and anything he wanted at his fingertips. Jesus was born into poverty and lived a humble life. It's what they chose to invest in that made the impact. That's what changed everything. Christmas is the celebration of when God came to invest himself into your life. That is what Christmas is all about. It's not a birthday party. It's a celebration of when God came to invest himself into your life. Both Jude and Paul understood the magnitude of what that meant. This is a message that you need to chase after. You need to contend for the faith, because that is a powerful impact. You need to contend for this. King Herod was just a small example of how the Roman Empire could be. When Paul and Jude were writing their letters, the danger of being a follower of Christ was a whole lot bigger than it was when Herod was just killing the babies in Bethlehem. Even though that was sick and twisted, by the time you get to Paul and Jude, look what they were doing to Christians then. That was horrifying compared to what Herod did. So it got so much worse. To get the message out of what Jesus did for mankind was important enough to lose their lives over. So they said, contend for the faith. Agonize to get that message out to people. They wanted the church to know that this message was that important. Go ahead and get the message out. We can all invest our lives into so many different things. Every one of us do. We can invest our lives in so many different things, but when we close our eyes in death, what impact did we make? Just evaluate your impact. What impact did you make? Jesus puts it in a powerful way. Look at Matthew chapter 16 and verse 26. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Both Jude and Paul were extremely passionate about getting this message out. They even cared for those who were persecuting them because they knew that they really didn't understand what was at stake. You're trying to shut out the message of Jesus Christ and you don't understand what it's going to cost. So they even cared about those who were persecuting them. If you're going to make the biggest impact on the world, it will be because you invested in the lives of others for the cause of Christ. That is the biggest impact you can ever make. You investing in the lives of other people for the cause of Christ, that will change somebody for all eternity. It won't just make their day better, it will change their life. People aren't going to come to church. They're not going to come to God. Let's just put it that way. They're not going to come to God because of religious obligation. Nobody's going to come to God because of religious obligation. They don't want to hear about requirements that God wants them to accomplish. People aren't coming to God because, well, he's got a list of things he wants me to do, so I guess I'll put in my application, let's go ahead and do it. People aren't coming to God because God has a list of rules, of do's and don'ts. They don't want that. They don't want to come to God because of religious obligations. Religion doesn't bring people to God. It leaves them with a bad taste in their mouth. That is what happens. That is what happens every time. I used to be in religion. I used to be part of that. And I can't tell you how many weeks Sunday came around and I'm like, I'll do it. I'll go to church. Why? Because it's my religious obligation. I don't want to go. But it's my religious obligation and I'm going to be bored and I'm going to hate this and what am I gaining out of this? I'm hoping to gain something. The most I could hope to gain out of going to church and fulfilling all the religious obligations was that I would appease God and he would be happy with me. That is what religion is. People are not going to come to God because of religion. The good thing is God never promoted religion. He has always promoted relationship. He has never promoted religion. You can go to a lot of churches today and go in there and you can sit in church and go, oh my goodness, you can die of boredom. It's going to happen right here, right now. And the church is full. What are you all doing here? It's our religious obligation. We're just trying to make God happy so he'll be pleased with us. You should check something else out. Relationship, it's a lot more fun. It's a blast. You should check out a relationship with God, not this religious obligation, because God never promoted religion. Look at Jesus' life. He stood up against the religious leaders all the time. Talk about a rebel. Jesus was very rebellious when it came to the religious scene. He's like, you're missing it, guys. You're doing all these things and putting all these burdens on the people so they can win the favor of God, and you're missing it. I'm standing right in front of you, and all you want to do is get me out because I'm not following your rules. It's not about religion, it's about relationship. The only thing that will bring people to God is the message that he loves them so much that he gave his very son to pay for their sins. Love will bring people to God. Religion will chase them away. And Jesus did it knowing that some would never accept that gift. But it had to at least be offered to them. I have to at least offer it to them. It's their choice to accept or reject. But they have to know that I love them this much. If we can't get to the place where we understand how important another person's soul is, we will never understand how to contend for the faith. You will never know how to contend for the faith if you don't understand the importance of another person's soul. You will just keep being good enough. You will just keep doing good enough. People need to know about the promise that God presented to them in offering a relationship. This is the promise, and oh my goodness, this promise is huge. If people could understand this promise, it could change their life. It's not that God tells you to go to church and put money in the offering plate and do all the religious things. No, just push all that away. God makes a different promise. He promises to save you, and with that relationship comes this promise. Look at Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 12. This verse changes everything. Hebrews 8 and verse 12. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their lawless deeds I will remember no more. No more. We live in a world full of broken people. They carry regrets. They carry hurt. They define themselves by their pasts, and they don't know where to find hope. I'm a bad person because I've done so many bad things. I can't come to church because of my stockpile of history. I can't come. God would never forgive me of that. Well, God made a promise. You come to me for the relationship. And just a perk here. Your sins and your lawless deeds, I will remember no more. It's clean. It's clean. You will be brand new. Forget the past. Let's move forward. I love you. I not only died for you to take away your sins, your slate's pretty dirty, so let's go ahead and clean it. And here's a brand new identity. Here's a brand new life. How about a fresh start? Because that comes with salvation also. Many people see God in the way that he has been misrepresented for centuries. A religious God. That is not our God. When a person comes to Christ, he's willing to forgive them 100%. He says he will remember their sin no more. Clean slate. Clean slate. A relationship with God himself. Jude was actually telling the Christians in his day, contend for the faith, because there are people coming in and misrepresenting God, and you need to represent him properly. Because this message is so important. People are too important. We can't afford to allow distractions to take our focus. Contend for the faith. Jesus said, what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? The problem is that when people get saved, they understand that they can't lose their soul anymore. So they oftentimes switch to gaining other things. I can gain the whole world now, right? Because I can't lose my own soul because of what Jesus did. So now I can invest my time into other things. What about other people? What about those that are still lost? What about their soul? Because if you never understand the importance of another person's soul, you will never know how to contend for the faith. If you're living your life stacking up a bunch of things, you got your collections, you got all your nice things. And people look at your life and go, oh yeah, you're good. God must be really happy with you because look at all the blessings in your life. Well, God doesn't God doesn't bless you because you're good. He blesses us because he's good. It doesn't work like that. God doesn't give you good things because you're living a good life, and he doesn't send bad things because you're living a bad life. That's not God. That's a misrepresentation of God. So when we realize that we're saved and we can't lose our own soul anymore, what do a lot of Christians do? They start gaining the whole world and forgetting about other people's souls. You cannot do that. That is what Jude is telling them. Contend for the faith. It may cost you your life, but your eternity's set. You're already good to go. What about his life? What about her life? It's worth laying down your life to get them to understand what God did for them and how much he loves them. It's worth it. So contend for the faith. People don't need religion thrown down their throats. They don't need that. They need to know that there's a God who doesn't care where they've been. He doesn't care what they've done. He loves them enough to wipe the slate clean in order to have a relationship with them. Let's start over. But what if they mess up after they accept Jesus Christ as their personal Savior? It's okay. It's okay, because the slate remains clean. It remains clean. But I dirtied it up. No, you behaved like something you weren't. But God made you new. And that slate will forever be clean. Salvation is an amazing thing. Grace is ridiculous. It's incredible. God would do that for me? Absolutely, because he wants a friend like you. He wants you to be in his family. People need to know that God's not focused on their past. He's looking at their future. Jesus Christ is the only way for a person to get to God. He's the only hope that anyone has for salvation, and that's just the truth. You can't be good enough to earn your way to heaven, because how do you get rid of all the bad things you've done? One good thing doesn't erase any bad things. I know in Home Alone we're taught that. A good deed erases a bad deed and it works double on Christmas or something like that. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. You can't get to heaven on your own. You can't change your history, but God can wipe your history out. And you can start over with a clean slate. The greatest impact anyone can have is introducing someone else to God. That is the greatest impact you will ever have. It is to help them understand that God values them and he wants to save them. He wants a relationship with them. Herod had it all, and he still left nothing of value behind. Jesus gave it all, and he's still changing lives today. That's quite an impact. What are you leaving behind for the next generation? I want you just to take a second and evaluate your impact. What are you leaving behind for the next generation? Do you recognize the importance of another soul? Do you understand that? And do they recognize you as a child of God because you're actually there caring for their soul? Like, that'll change the world. So evaluate your impact. What are you investing your life in? What are you doing? Maybe you got a lot of cool stuff, but as it's been said many, many times in the past, hearses don't pull U-Hauls. You can't take any of it with you. When you die, you leave it all behind. But you also leave a legacy behind. You leave an impact behind. What's the impact that you're leaving on this world? You get one shot. You get to live this life one time. What's the impact that you leave? Do you care for other people's souls? I'm begging you, as the church, I'm begging you, contend for the faith. Contend for the faith.